Good day and greetings from Pretoria, South Africa. My name is Dr. Charles Cotter. I'm the host of Talking to the Titans of Training. We have a very special guest today, Leon Steyn, all the way from Germany. It's freezing cold in South Africa and also Youth Day. So I'll be asking Leon my very first question, what is his message to the South African youth? Just to give you the backstory, my name is Dr. Charles Cotter. I'm the host of Talking to the Titans of Training. It's an initiative that we started 2 weeks ago just to celebrate and to recognize the contribution, the work, the career journeys of the Titans of Training, the innovators, the movers and shakers, people that have made a meaningful contribution to the training community in sometimes an unrecognized and certainly unappreciated profession. So today we have Leon Steyn with us. If you could just get the housekeeping out of the way. So welcome to episode 3. We'll be interviewing Leon Steyn. He'll be joining us very shortly, all the way from Germany. And just to give you a bit of my background, I've been in the field of education, training, development for the last 19 years as an independent consultant, having worked in 18 different countries. Also, for over 140 different companies, recently received accreditation as a trusted trainer by the global quality assurance body, Course Conductor. So at this very point, I'd like to welcome my guest all the way from Germany, Leon Steyn. Leon, I got to know in 2017, and he's a former HR executive. He's very active in the European and global training community. Also, I think, Leon, if I remember correctly, started out in your training career in 1995. So a long journey, and hopefully today we can unpack this journey. So Leon, thank you for accepting my invitation to join this Talking to the Titans of Training, episode 3, all the way from Germany. Thank you for joining us.
Morning, Charles. Yes, it's very nice speaking to you, and thank you for this great opportunity. I think it's a great initiative, and I think, you hit the nail on the head with the introduction, where trainers quite often do not get the recognition that they deserve, and it's very nice to be part of a group of people that you are speaking to.
Yes.
So greetings, from Frankfurt in Germany.
Yeah, wonderful. Hopefully the weather's a little bit better in Frankfurt than it is in Pretoria and the rest of South Africa.
Well, we've actually got a nice cool day today. The Germans don't like this sort of weather, but I enjoy the cooler weather. And this time of the year, sort of early summer, you can get beautiful weather for 3-4 days and then a bit of rain. But overall it's very mild and it's actually quite pleasant.
That's fantastic. Leon, growing up in South Africa, distinguishing yourself as an HR executive, as a trainer, South African community, I think you're aware today is also a public holiday. It's Youth Day. So I don't know if I could just ask an impromptu question. Do you have any particular message for the youth of South Africa? We know with COVID-19 and a lot of other issues, high rates of unemployment, there's a lot of depression right now in the country. So any positive message that you could share with the South African youth?
Charles, thank you. I think that's a very relevant question. If one is in a situation of hopelessness, everything looks dark, everything looks somber, and to maybe try and view it a little bit from the South African perspective. If somebody, a young person, is unemployed, and now with COVID-19 being a temporary but very traumatic setback, I think the best thing is to find something that you can hold on to. We are all unique. We are all special in our own way. And even if it is starting to volunteer somewhere, I find that quite often a very underrated bridge that one can build to getting exposure. Because quite frankly, if I'm stuck in a village or in a town somewhere where nobody knows about me, I'm going to stay that way. But if I take the first step as a young person and start volunteering at any place, I'm going to immediately improve my exposure and just drastically improve my chance of being noticed by somebody without going the formal, job application route. I would say those two things. Find something to hold on to and start volunteering somewhere, so people get to know you.
No, that's excellent advice. Thanks, Leon. I totally agree with you. I think exposure is very important. Previous speakers on Talking to the Titans of Training have spoken about differentiation, standing out from the masses. You know, this crowd, it's a very saturated job market, as we know. I think South African
Absolutely.
youth unemployment is very close to 45%. Even unemployment rate amongst graduates is also exceptionally high. So I think it's very tough to stand out. And like you said, just showing that positive attitude, that willingness to volunteer, to demonstrate and to showcase your competency without working for a cent. I think it's something that we all need to focus on. It creates that necessary exposure, that platform in which we can showcase our abilities. And then hopefully that'll be the launch pad, the catalyst to a bright job, you know, and career prospects. I think that's very important.
Absolutely. And, you know, obviously one can't volunteer for your, you know, for your entire life, but it certainly, there's a time and place for that. And
Yes.
every now and again, one hears of story, one hears of, you know, of people's own stories where they started volunteering. They ended up being able to get a food allowance, a travel
Yes.
allowance, you know, and before long, that person made it into the formal employment sector. So,
Yeah.
you know, there is a time where one has to reach out and give until you're at the
Yeah.
point where, you know, an opportunity comes along.
Yeah, that's great. That's great advice. Thanks, Leon. All right, so Leon, as far as I know, your training career dates back to 1995. So we need to turn the clock back. So maybe you could just talk us through that first couple of chapters of your training career. How did it all start? The genesis, the who, the what, the when. Were there any influential mentors or coaches that helped you in those early years just to reposition yourself in the market, to guide you, to navigate you, to support you, you know, to get your career and training started? I also just want to acknowledge that you were very active in the South African training market for many years, and certainly the South African learning development community, one of our proudest sons and exports, now applying your trade in Germany. But let's start in 1995. Where did it all start and how did it start for you? If you could just talk us through those initial chapters of your training career.
Charles, due to the death of my father-in-law in 1993, I had to make a drastic career change and move up from Durban to Benoni, where my in-laws stayed. I had a very good relationship with them. And so it was the natural thing for me to, or for us, you know, to move to my mother-in-law. She lived on a small holding, you know, to take care of her because she was, you know, she was a German citizen, spoke very little Afrikaans and no English. So she was pretty much at the mercy of whoever could help her. And then I entered the training industry sort of via the cleaning industry. One of the people who gave me a great opportunity is a guy by the name of Neil Fick. Neil Fick is the owner of Malicare in South Africa. And on the 15th of February, 1995, my onboarding started with Neil Fick giving us a training session about product knowledge, you know, in the cleaning industry, the types of machine and equipment. And as I was sitting there, I thought, well, this actually looks like fun. I could enjoy this. And before long, I started offering these trainings, you know, on the various products. And then later on, I became national sales manager, and that was when I started training salespeople. I took 1 or 2 courses, you know, sort of training courses, and I loved the actual training part, and that was really where it started. And one of the sales courses I attended was by a guy called Hugh Cummings, at the time from Sales Impact, and he just had a most relaxed but powerful way of sharing information in such a way that you remembered it. So he sort of stuck out very much. And then another guy who was very influential in sharing the passion is a guy called Henk Labuskaghni. And in fact, he's somebody I have contacted to nominate. You may want to have a chat to him as well.
Okay, I'll definitely give him a call based on your recommendation. That speaks volumes.
Thank you. And he was a very authentic and a sound and a knowledgeable fellow, but conveyed the information, the knowledge in small bits, but with passion.
Yeah.
And those, I would say were the two greatest influences from a hands-on training point of view. And then, of course, over the years, reading the literature, from all the big names, Jim Collins, Steve Jobs, whole host of names and books and things, hundreds of books on sales and training, etc., that I read through.
Yeah. Okay. So to summarize, it started out with training in product knowledge, and then moving over to sales, and then empowering yourself through famishing as much reading literature as possible. And I'm always reminded of the quote, leaders are readers. So I think
Absolutely.
It's a common, trend amongst the most successful trainers is this ability to empower themselves to read as much as possible. And I think that's very important. I think just listening to episode 1, Derek Hendricks, and episode 2, Graham Lartachan, I think I see a strong overlap between what they're saying and what you're saying. It almost seems like as if training is like contagious. It's like once you get infected, there's almost no turning back. It almost becomes like a life's journey. It's not just a job. It's a passion. You've mentioned that, and I think that for me is a common denominator that stood out for everybody that I've interviewed thus far and talking to the Titans of Training. It seems like there's this passion which drives all of us towards achieving our career goals.
Absolutely. It's a delightful disease, if one can put it like that. And I think also later on, when I moved to human resources and skills development, and soft skills training in the years when I was with Prestige in the Bidvest group, there the dynamics and the ability to learn with every learning session as well. As much as one is the trainer and the facilitator, if you keep your eyes open, you learn, and you can almost steal so much information from the people that are in the class with you. And if one keeps that, that to and fro thinking open, one actually grows while you are training.
Absolutely.
You don't stagnate.
So it becomes a form of reciprocal learning. And like you correctly said, continuous learning is very important, lifelong learning. Trainers are not immune from that. We're not exempt from that. Just like we expect our learners to invest in training and development, we ourselves as professionals, we must stay on the cutting edge, like you said, through reading, through attending constant training. And we know with the SAPTA days as well, we're very committed towards trainers registering, and of course then earning continuous professional development points that they needed to do annually. And the only way to do that was to prove that you've invested in your personal and professional development. So I think trainers are not immune from that. And I think you've really amplified that point. It's essential.
Absolutely, Charles. You don't. If you don't learn, you don't stagnate. You actually regress. And one regresses a lot quicker than you think you do. And I think, COVID-19 has been another example of that. But one has to continuously keep improving yourself, even if it is a short course. The short courses, free offerings from LinkedIn are amazing sources of information.
Yeah, that's good advice.
Very much. It is a lifelong learning journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So Leon started out in training 1995. Fast forward, you moved to Bidvest, moved more into a training management position, skills development position, ultimately concluding with HR executive position. So given that transition then from training into training management, what would you say were some of the career highlights? If you had to pinpoint 3 career highlights that defined your career, what would they be? And if I could just double up on that question, if you could give advice to other trainers or training managers as to what are the 3 critical success factors to prosper and to flourish in this career, what advice would you give?
Very interesting question, Charles. The first highlight for me was the first feedback form I received after my very first training.
Okay, wow.
You know, when I realized that people appreciate what I'm doing,
Yes.
when they understood, you know, a concept that they maybe thought they knew and they didn't know, that for me was the very first highlight. It was, wow, okay, I can actually do this.
Yes.
I knew I could, but I sort of got the real confirmation, you know, from a real person. It was the first highlight. The second highlight was being given the opportunity to start a training company within Bidvest. The company is called Edge Performance Improvement.
Yes.
That was also a most amazing journey, you know, being able to do that within a corporate environment. I obviously had the support of the likes of a guy called Paul Roux, who was the chief HR officer at the time. And it was an amazing feeling the day that the company was registered and we invoiced, you know, our first client. And then my third highlight was actually just about 3 months ago. A lady from Eritrea, a lady by the name of Entisar, was in, she works for Amazon in Hamburg. And she came to me after the training and said, Leon, for the first time in my life, I believe in myself. And she's a lady of about, I'd say, 45.
Wow.
You know, having moved from Eritrea with her parents, went to school in Germany, and always had this, you know, a little bit of a uncertainty and lack of confidence. And although at the time the course was intercultural intelligence, I obviously just highlighted, you know, self-worth and things like that in the course. And it was amazing. You know, that whole trip back home, I sort of, you know, couldn't get over that feeling of that this person's life had been changed. And that was not necessarily the intention. So I think the unintended consequence of what we do, one should also not forget. And then what I firmly believe are my critical success factors, and I think should maybe be for most trainers. First one is passion. You've got to enjoy this job because, and I think Derek mentioned it as well, it is a lonely job. Yep. People think, you know, because you're with people all the day, oh, you must be fun and you're with people all the day. And you mentioned it as well. When your inner introvert takes over, when you're sitting at the hotel and you just want to say, now go away and leave me alone. I'm having my coffee. One's got to have the passion because the conditions are not always ideal.
Absolutely.
The second critical success factor for me is authenticity. You've got to be yourself. You cannot be someone else. The stress levels that you incur trying to imitate, and I'm not saying one shouldn't learn and take little excerpts from other people, but you've got to be yourself. You've got to be your own true self, your own ambassador, if I can put it like that.
Absolutely.
And then the third point is you've got to have perseverance. Boy, oh boy, you've got to persevere because times get very tough. You've got to do things, especially if you're a full-time trainer, to keep the wolves from the door, but still remain motivated and happy at the same time, because that, you know, is part of the positive energy which, as trainers, we share and inspire other people. So that is my take on those, Charles.
Yeah, thanks, Leon. Fantastic. So to summarize, you were saying passion, authenticity, and perseverance. And I think we can all relate to that. I think this contributes to your longevity in the industry. You thrive, you prosper. And I think those are very important values. Thank you for sharing your career highlights as well. I think very touching story, especially your learning from Eritrea. And I think it just dawned upon me that trainers impact on the lives of people. Although we're facilitators of learning, I think, in fact, that's how you introduce yourself, as a facilitator of learning. Although we're facilitators of learning, we're also facilitators of transformation. We sometimes inadvertently, as you said, we impact on the lives of people. And being a global trainer like yourself, I think your exposure, the demographic of your learning is significantly different to a typical South African trainer, but the impact is still the same. And I think that's very important. And like you said, you know, just starting out and getting that first learn evaluation form and the pride when you look at it. And I've always said to a lot of trainers that the day that you wake up and you're not nervous about the next training session, that is your physiological sign that you need to exit this industry. And at the end of the training session, if you are not interested in reviewing the learning evaluation forms, then I think that's another signal that you need to depart the industry. So I think those are my cues that I would use. Although we've done hundreds, if not thousands of different training sessions, if you don't get nervous, if you don't have that anxiety, and you don't invest in the preparation, you do your research, and at the end of the session, you don't, with keen interest, want to review the performance feedback that you get from the learners, then I think you should move on and find another job and another career. I think that is really almost the fuel, the energy that revitalizes in almost a ruthless and a very relentless industry. Like you said, it's very tough to make your mark and to distinguish yourself. There's so much competition out there. There are thousands of trainers who are very competent, who are well qualified, and to differentiate yourself in that ultra competitive market is very challenging.
Absolutely. And I think we've all experienced attending training sessions where the trainer had actually reached their sell-by date, because
Yes.
it immediately pulls down the whole level of the training. And you can sense it, long
Yes.
before the person has shared any personal history or anything. You can just sense that this person has lost their edge. And you're quite right.
Yeah,
That
absolutely.
little bit of nervousness, I believe, is that, built-in energy meter that, I'm on the stage and I have to perform. I've got to forget about myself and focus, on the people who are here to get something from me.
Yeah, thanks, Leon. I think it's good advice. All right, so the topic that everybody's talking about at the moment, and you've already mentioned it, COVID-19, a global pandemic. I think your experience probably in Germany is probably slightly different to the South African and the African experience. So maybe you could just talk us through the impact that COVID-19 had on your business model as an independent trainer, being located and operating from Germany. How did you respond? And what advice would you give to other trainers who may be struggling to re-emerge from almost like a phoenix from the ashes? This COVID-19 has had a devastating impact, not just on the global economy, but the learning and development industry as a whole. So if you could just talk us through that chapter, how did you survive COVID-19?
Charles, besides reading about it as something happening far away in China, my first reality check was an email from the one company I'm training for. They said, can you give us alternative dates for your training next week? It's been postponed. Wow. Okay, so I sent them alternative training dates. We postponed. There were about 4 sessions in March that I still had to execute. And 2 days after that, the email came back, all training has been postponed until further notice. Now, you and I know, if you get a mail or a voice message or a telephone call to say until further notice, fills you with dread.
Yeah, it's like cancellation.
Yeah. And that was, I'll never forget that was on the 11th of March. And I took, well, first of all, I had all this time on my hands now, which for me was very strange. I don't do excess time very well. I must stay busy. I try and keep myself busy, obviously. But so my first response was, okay, how long is this going to last? And I pretty soon realized I don't know. And then I think maybe my survival or crisis management skills kicked in from some previous trauma I'd also, experienced during the Angolan War, and I was very fortunate to survive that. There's certain things I don't know, so let me focus on what I do know. And that for me was the big thing. I started working, upskilling myself a little bit. I had a look where it was free training. I've never attended as many webinars during these last 3 months
Yes,
as in my whole life.
sure.
And I started working on things, but I must say it took me about 3 weeks to a month to really get into the mode of this thing. This COVID-19 is not going to go away soon. I'm going to have to prepare for the long haul.
That was the reality.
That was the reality. And then so gradually, I was just hoping that as one listened to the news from May, they started speaking about, okay, possibly June in our case. And then being prepared for when one suddenly has to start training again. That was the third thing, because you get into a different mindset, and then you quickly have to get out of that again. And in fact, my wife at some stage said, listen, don't get too relaxed, because you might get a call and then you have to start training again quickly, which is exactly what happened.
Yeah.
So one has to keep your adaptability skills. You've got to keep at the top of your mind at all times. But to focus on what one can change and what one has control over. It sounds like a cliche, but it really is the only way to manage it.
Yeah. Well, I totally agree with that. As you were like recounting your chapter of COVID-19, I think it's really a bookmark for a lot of us in the industry. I was reminded of Stephen Covey's circle of influence and circle of concern. And I think a lot of us tended to focus on the things that we cannot control, the circle of concern, and we fixated on that. And I tried, similar to you, I tried to focus on the circle of influence, the things that I can control, like investing in yourself, empowering yourself, getting to a heightened state of readiness. So when the industry and the market does shift, and I think it's already happened in Germany. You said you did your first face-to-face training session. Is there a specific date? Can you recall the date when you did your first face-to-face program post-COVID-19?
It was on the 5th of June.
5th of June. All right. So the industry's already shifted in Germany. I have a very strong sense in South Africa that the market is gradually shifting. Like you alluded to with our intro, we're probably like 5 or 6 weeks behind the tempo of, the German reopening of the economy and the industry. But I think that's my advice to South African trainers, is to make sure, similar to Leon Steyn, that you are in a heightened state of readiness. So when those emails and calls come, that you can deliver, and your turnaround time is as efficient as possible. I think that's very important. It's a very powerful message. Thank you for sharing your story with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so Leon, I'm just going to put up a slide just to help our viewers and our listeners, just to give an idea of Leon's product service offering. So Leon, if you could just maybe take us through your professional portfolio. So what programs do you focus on? And if we need to contact you for any of these professional service offerings, how do we contact you? What is your social media presence? If you could just share this information with us as briefly as possible. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much. Well, it starts, facilitation of learning. My sort of slug line, as they call it, is maximizing learning that lasts. I use that approach, whether I'm training a whole host, about 15 different courses that I train, including emotional intelligence. I'll speak about 3-minute nuggets in a while. Delivering presentations, solving problems, understanding diversity and inclusion, and the science of personal transformation. So in all of that, whether it is by workshop, whether it is course, and nowadays, either online or face-to-face, I use that also in a coaching capacity. Every now and again, people from the course say they want to know a little bit more, and it sort of starts off with 1 or 2 pro bono sessions, and then usually translates, into that person becoming a client. I like to write as well. You may have noticed on LinkedIn that I'm writing a weekly theories about transformation based on my book, Transformation in 28 Days. I enjoy that. And I enjoy taking, complex things and making them easy to understand for people. But that's basically what I do. I'm going to be venturing a bit more into into public speaking, but we'll get to that just now. So my email address is events@leonsteyn.net. My website is www.leonsteyn.net. I'm on LinkedIn as Leon Ernest Steyn, and then in Germany we have something similar to LinkedIn, which is called Xing, which is in German, and there I'm just Leon Steyn. So the simplest is to start, maybe with an email.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thanks, Leon. So to summarize, you pretty much, like myself, a blended learning practitioner. So you continue to offer face-to-face training, but you also have transitioned to a virtual trainer. So you do online training as well, coaching, consulting, writing. I just want to recommend your book. I think I was one of the first ones in South Africa to read it, Transformation in 28
Absolutely.
Days. A very powerful book. So I'd strongly recommend that you contact Leon, get a copy of the book. I think especially as we exit COVID-19, that's the one wave of change. Who knows what the next wave of change would be? I think it's technological change. I think it's artificial intelligence. I think the robots are coming. That's the next wave of change. And I think your book does offer almost a practical toolkit. I think that's how you promoted it. It's a toolkit, a daily toolkit, which will help you just to navigate through the change and transformation. Also, specifically with your training offering, seems to me like you specialize in personal transformational, professional development, a lot of the so-called soft skills, which I call power skills. I think that's very important, and business communication and management and leadership development. I think that's how I've got to know your product service offering. I mean, I think you have probably well over 30 years of management experience. One cannot put a price tag on that. And indeed, you are truly one of the titans of training. So thanks for that.
Thank you.
Leon, you spoke about working for a company, Amazon.com. And I must be honest, that is one of my bucket list companies that I would like to train with. I think along with Google and Amazon, they easily my top 3 companies. Deloitte is the other company that I would like to do some sort of work with. But if you could just give us, you've exited COVID-19, German economy, very progressive, one of the first European countries to open up the business borders to international travel with some of your neighboring business partners. So what projects are you currently working on? What is in your pipeline at the moment? And if you look towards the future, if you fast forward, where do you see yourself? I presume that you would be in the industry for another 5 to 10 years, making an active contribution. So what's happening in the Leon Steyn pipeline currently? And do you still have any goals or dreams, aspirations, things, our friend Abraham Maslow, the self-actualization? Are there any self-actualization goals that you are still pursuing at the moment?
Absolutely, Charles, thank you. The company that actually opened the door for me to Amazon is a company called Dr. Arnold Kitzmann. They are a well-established training organization in Germany. And they have a very strong and mature network. So my first item in the pipeline is to continue with them and to expand the service offering that I do for them. Second one is I've done quite a bit of research during the COVID time on micro-learning, presenting learning, and I know it's something that you support as well in your blended learning approach, is where one packages courses in short spurts of, say, 3 to 5 minutes, and one accumulates those almost like building blocks so that you can actually complete one short course in 3 to 5 minutes. So in other words, it's almost like a just-in-time delivery where you're gathering the information that you need at that point in time. And I suppose very similar to what we do with YouTube. You want to know how to thread a needle, you go onto YouTube and you say, how do I thread a needle? And boom, there are a few hundred videos on that. So I'm working on a model. I've completed my first module and I will be launching that within the next 2 months. And I've actually called it 3-minute nuggets. In the industry, they call it short, either chunking or nuggets. And the third thing in my pipeline is I'm wanting to spend a bit more time marketing myself and positioning myself as a public speaker, specifically with how to deal with a crisis. And I'm going to use COVID sort of as the door opener. But in my life, just very shortly, I survived a firearm accident. I came through that. My 12-year, at the time, my daughter was 12 years old. She broke her neck. We came through that. I went through a liquidation, was able to survive that. My eldest daughter experienced some very traumatic things in her life. We were able to come through that. And then obviously surviving life in general. And there are a few things that one can apply to any crisis in one's life. So that is what I want to focus on, sort of as a motivational, very practical, almost like a support toolkit, if you will. So those are the 3 things in my pipeline. A dream would be to be invited, to get an invitation to be invited to speak in America. That would be like the ultimate thing, but it must be a nice place so that I can combine it with a bit of holiday as well. So those are the things that I sort of dream about, where the speaking could eventually take over from the training. I think sort of as one hits the over 50s club and then the over 60s club, you need to look at things that take a little bit less energy. But I enjoy the training. If my health lasts up, and God willing, I would like to stay busy for the next 10 years.
Thanks, Leon. Very inspirational journey that you've traveled on. And I think the lesson for all of us is that in this industry and life in general, we are confronted with a lot of adversity. I think you've given us many examples of personal and professional setbacks, and your ability to be resilient, your ability to be agile, and to stay positive and optimistic. I think it's really a very powerful message. I think I love what you're saying, embracing the future of learning, micro-learning, blended learning. I think these are not just the current, but also the future of learning. And I really was impressed with what you said. And, I feel very strongly about this. Trainers need to be more research orientated. So learning content must be evidence-based. And I don't think trainers empower themselves with this research capacity, these research skills. And I think it's good that you're using that as the building block of developing a model. I think a lot of good trainers are very good at replicating the models of others, but we're very deficient when it comes to creating and conceptualizing our own models. So it's reassuring to hear that you focused on that. And I mean, coming to America, I think that's the dream. I spent a couple of days in Washington last year, and I think I can really relate to what you're saying. It was an incredibly powerful experience, and definitely one of my career highlights. And I think you have all the tools to transition to a public speaker. I think Graham Lartachan said it in his interview of episode 2. We need to go into storytelling mode. And I think Leon Steyn has a lot of stories to tell that resonate with all of us, and certainly can empower and assist us to overcome adversity and the challenges that we confronted with daily in our personal and professional lives. So good luck with the future. I think you certainly made a meaningful contribution, and we can all learn from your experience and your wisdom. So thank you for that.
No, Charles, thank you too, and thank you, for this opportunity. And it really is a great opportunity to be able to share, to help other people who are maybe starting up, or to be able to share something that makes their lives and their startup easier.
Yeah. And Leon, thank you. That would be my final question then, as we start disengaging from the Talking to the Titans of Training, Leon Steyn, episode 3. If you could just give us some advice, similar to my question to Derek and Graham. So the new entrants into the training industry, what advice would you give to them, people that are trying to crack the industry, trying to make their mark in the industry? And then what advice would you give to people like myself who are well established? I've been in the industry for 19 years. if we had to reinvent ourselves, if we had to redefine our professional identity, like you mentioned at the start of this conversation, just as a general question, what broad advice could you give to the new entrants, but also the well-established people in this very ruthless global learning and development industry?
Charles, I think the first thing for new entrants is, the reality is we're living in an artificial intelligence world.
Yeah.
And there's that English saying that, chance favors the prepared mind. You've got to be prepared for when that opportunity comes your way. And one of the first steps is to become very competent and very conversant with technology. One's got to decide which are the mainline things, mainline platforms, to use like Skype and Microsoft Teams and Zoom, etc. But one also has to become, very competent with online learning platforms. And then to decide, to rather go almost using the funneling approach. Start broad to develop a good footprint and realize what your passion is. Because usually up front, we don't know what our passion is. One sort of defaults later on into the passion by chance, or you find out that's what you really like. So I would say go broad in a field, obviously where you have some expertise, have some experience, and never stop upskilling yourself. That's the one thing for old established trainers, old in years, not necessarily old in, old in experience, not old in years, is to realize that every now and again, one has to reinvent yourself. One has to take a step back and say, okay, is what I'm doing maybe a bit archaic? Do I need to change my approach? And sometimes changing something like your dress code. It's as simple as that. Just bringing about a bit of a fresh look, because we also live in a world where people are constantly looking for something new. People are in a mode, all of us, I think, of instant gratification. And I think as established trainers, we need to reinvent ourselves, either with a new type of product, either with a new model, as you're saying, and then advertise that model. And then, maybe to drop some of the things that you don't enjoy anymore, that aren't necessarily that economically viable.
Yeah.
But I think just making a change and almost remaining current.
Yeah.
And then if you think you've learned it all, that is the day when you should leave. Because in this industry, we've mentioned it a few times, you never stop learning, you never know it all.
Yeah.
So once one gets that feeling that I've learned as much as I want to, I think that's the day when one should consider, okay, maybe this is now enough.
Yeah,
so that's basically what I would, my advice, Charles.
Yeah, thanks, Leon. Excellent advice. And I totally agree with you. So for the new entrants, I think what you're saying is just to empower yourself, become a specialist, your digital literacy. I think you said your technological skills very important, that you're able to harness the online learning delivery platform, which is going to become the default learning delivery platform. So I think that's very important. And then for the old hands, just constantly reinventing yourself, looking for ways of differentiation, and just rejuvenating, looking at different products. I think we said it with Graham's interview as well, a lot of noise and clutter right now, and you just need to declutter. You need to become more precise with your, almost like a laser focus precision that you need to have just to cut through all of this noise and clutter, so that you can offer a learning solution. I think that's very important that we do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Leon, if I can just give you a final opportunity, if you could just share your contact details and your product offering again, and then I think we'll conclude and wrap up the interview. Any final thoughts? If you had to recommend any of these specific training programs, what would you say is the one that you would recommend as the most applicable and relevant in 2020?
Charles, I would definitely start off with understanding diversity and inclusion. Number 2, the science of personal transformation. We've
Yes.
had so many examples of that one has to transform. We are in states almost of perpetual transformation. And then being able to communicate, delivering successful presentations, which is my course on communication.
Yes.
And also, you know, the 3 steps to becoming a professional communicator. One is not able to transform successfully if you cannot communicate that transformation either to your clients or to an employer. You know, so those would be my top recommendations. And I would appreciate an email to events@leonsteyn.net. Internet is www.leonsteyn.net. LinkedIn, I'm Leon Ernest Steyn, and then I use you know, all the platforms for online learning, and I will very soon be launching my 3-minute nugget series, which has to do with micro learning. Thank you very much, Charles.
Yeah, no, it's been a great pleasure. Thank you for your time, for your willingness to contribute and share in the spirit of this growth mindset, this abundance mindset. Like I said, we got to know each other dating back to 2017. And I think this is one of the outstanding characteristics that I've got to know about you, is this willingness to share and contribute. Thank you for that. You are indeed a titan of training, and thank you for sharing your journey with us. And I'm sure that you'll continue to support the upcoming conversations with the other titans of training. So thank you, and enjoy the warmer weather conditions in Frankfurt, Germany, and I'm sure that we'll stay in contact. I would strongly recommend that any of you connect with Leon. He's very active on LinkedIn in particular. You've got his email address, you've got his contact details. So please, if you want to invest in training and you want to piggyback off more than 30 years of management and training experience, please consult with Leon. I would strongly recommend that. Thank you, Leon.
Thank you too, and thank you for the series, you know, which you very aptly titled The Titans of Training. I think it's a great initiative, and thank you for doing that. Enjoy Youth Day in South Africa today, and I will enjoy the weather here, and we will be. And thank you so much.
Thanks, Leon. You keep well. We'll stay in contact.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. So just to conclude, talking to the titles of training, episode 3, just a reminder, Dr. Charles Cotter, my 5 pillars of training: subject matter expertise, strategic human resources management, strategic learning and development, management and leadership development, power skills, similar to what Leon Steyn does, and also business communication. So please contact me. I've shared my contact details previously, so just a reminder of my contact details and also my social media presence. So you can contact me on my cell phone number, my email address. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please like this video, and also please click the notify button if you would like to receive alerts of upcoming Talking to the Titans of Training series. Similar to Leon, you'll also find me very active on LinkedIn. So my professional profile and also my company page, Dr. Charles Cotter and Business Associates. You'll also find me on Twitter, Facebook, my company page on Facebook, and also my portfolio of over 155 slideshow presentations on SlideShare. Very proud to say that I've received over 750,000 global views and also very close to 50,000 downloads. Also remind you that I'm an accredited trusted trainer with a global quality assurance body, course conductor. So at this point, this is Dr. Charles Cotter signing out. Thank you for tuning in to Talking to the Titans of Training, episode 3, where we interviewed a German-based trainer, Leon Steyn, who's a very proud South African export. I look forward to engaging with future episodes. We're going to be interviewing another international trainer very shortly, and these programs and conversations will be published on YouTube on a bi-weekly basis. Thank you for listening, and thank you for your support. Thank you. Bye-bye.